Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the EdTech Brew. I'm Ann Vega.
And I'm Rosie Flugel.
I'm James Varlak.
And I'm Gonzalo Sandoval.
And I would like to introduce our special guests for our third podcast, the dynamic duo, Feli Lopez and Omar Lopez. Thank you both for joining us today. So one of the things that we thought would be interesting is to talk about all the digital skills that educators need right now. This pandemic has kind of catapulted everybody, every teacher, every student, every parent, where they've got to have some very key skills. And so I'd like to start off with you, Feli and Omar. What would you consider of vital importance for all of our educators to what kind of skills they should possess?
I believe that the first skill is establishing relationships with your students. Before we introduce the content, before we introduce the technology, and before we introduce everything content related, I believe the most important thing is establishing those relationships with your kids. And then the content and the tools and the technology comes into place. But to me, it's teaching from the heart all the time. Establishing all of those relationships with your kids so that they know you care. And I believe that when students feel loved, the learning happens. They need to feel important. They need to feel empowered. They need to feel that you care about them, right? Because they're our future. They're our babies. So to me, that's the number one thing. And then everything, even during this time, everything comes into place.
Do you feel like it's harder to build those relationships remotely?
I believe so. I believe it's a little bit more challenging. But again, we go back to all the tools that we have with technology, all the things that can be incorporated into our lessons that can facilitate knowing your kids. Because sometimes when we're in the classroom, when we have our kids in front of us, we tend to read their faces, but sometimes that's not enough, right? We know who's going to be the student who's going to be raising the hand. We know who's going to be the student that it's usually sits in front, right, and or stays after class during passing period to have a conversation with you. But now with technology and everything that we are using into our lessons, I think we have more opportunities to provide the space and the time for our students to really tell us their stories, to really tell us who they are and how they feel. So it goes back to having the time for that, right? I know we're in a constant hurry because we have so many TICs to teach, we have so many content to cover, but I strongly believe we definitely need to set the time to establish the relationships.
And on that, just going to the relationships, I think it's using what we have now to provide a platform to hear them out, to hear their stories. That way we get to connect with them, because once we connect, we have a lot of skills. So how can we use these applications that we're currently using to provide a listening safe space for our students? And I think that's once we do that and they feel valued, that they feel that their story and what they have to say matters, that's when the relationships start to develop. And yes, it's a little bit more challenging because we cannot give high fives, but we got into just putting our hand up in front of our cameras just to give air high fives or virtual high fives. So that's what we started to use. And again, building those relationships, I think it's the first step into just developing everything else.
I had the opportunity, the blessing, I was invited to a class to talk to the students about Flipgrid. And one of the students in the class, she wanted for me to meet her dog. And I was like, yes, let's do it, right? Let's do it. And the teacher was a little bit like, oh, but we're not supposed to talk about that right now. And I was like, it's totally okay. I love dogs. So it's okay. We have time to continue talking what we were going to be talking about, but go ahead. So, and the girl after that, she was like, wow. And I was like, oh my God. So we had like not even 2 minutes, a conversation, 2 minutes about her beautiful dog, right? And she was happy. And after that, she was engaged, she was connected, she was asking questions. And it only took me 2 minutes.
That's so exciting. What about you, Rosie? What do you think?
Sorry, right along those lines is communication skills, right? It runs the gamut. Just like Feely and Omar were mentioning, that building that relationship, right? So you need to have those communication skills. We need to share with students that you're missing them, you wish you could see them in person, and that you're going to be excited to see them soon. But also, I think it's important for teachers to provide feedback, right? It's not as easy when you're not in person, right? They need to not ignore that or forget that it's how important that qualitative feedback is for student growth, right? And that sometimes we forget. And we have tools. We have Google Docs. We have Canvas. We have Google Classroom, Flipgrid, right? Cami, Seesaw, and we could go on and on. Lots of tools that help teachers provide feedback, whether it's text feedback or audio feedback. But that's what keeps students connected and not so lost in this remote learning environment. So I think adapting their communication skills is really important. And, we have to stay connected, not just with our students, build that relationship with students, but with the community, with parents. And distance doesn't prohibit collaboration, right? We can still collaborate with Google Docs, and we could go on and on and on, but adapting those communication skills for this remote learning environment is so important, I think.
What about you, James?
Agree with everything said so far. I've got my little notepad out, making a list, right, so far on everything. I totally agree. I also think along the lines of collaboration, now we have opportunities where we can have students collaborate with each other. So we have, a great digital skill for a teacher to have, almost a must-have now, is can you run some type of virtual meeting, right? Can you get on the platform? Can you share it with others? Can you start the meeting? Do you have your materials and content ready? But then can you make it an engaging space like we've already talked about, right? So we know research says, the more engaging the space is, the more apt that students are going to want to return to that space, right? So can you do those things like give a virtual high five? Can you create a Bitmoji sticker, right, and add it to a child's work, right? So those are really simple things, really easy we have tools that are free that can do that. But I think now, right, we have things like breakout rooms, or we can get on a group session with a bunch of students, and we can even make those things way more collaborative than maybe, right, doing and almost not looking the same as the classroom, but very similar to the classroom, right? So we can get on a doc together. We can watch, a YouTube video that maybe is a 360 model of something, and all comment on it and talk about it. We can share our thoughts. We can, post our text in the chat where everybody can see. We can create a Google site where everyone in the world can kind of take notice of it. So we have many different tools, but I think that aspect of collaboration is really important now that the students, they're not going to be face to face. And so if I can get on a virtual meeting, let's say I'm a student who is maybe back in the classroom. Well, if I can get on a virtual meeting, maybe in a little smaller group, I can still find really cool ways to connect with those students. So I think for sure, all the collaboration in the community, building that connectivity, but then also being able to kind of run and facilitate a virtual meeting. And then from there, everything will kind of take off.
Great. And I will say that one of the things that I was very fortunate that we had already started was using Teams and Meet before all of this started. So it was not such a large learning curve for our teachers. Gonzalo.
Yes, totally agree with all the comments that have been made so far. One of the things that you guys that I want to emphasize is that when it comes to relationships, we also need to make note of that the teachers also need to be able to have relationships amongst each other, as far as being able to learn to share what they know, any kind of skills that they have acquired, teach the others so that they can be more effective when it comes to teaching. And I saw a lot of that going on when we had the virtual meetings, the virtual trainings for Canvas, for example. Teachers teaching each other in the chat, showing them how to do certain things, and that is great. and that is something that I think is becoming more and more popular nowadays. That we have all these tools that we have to be able to connect, especially all these platforms that we have: Zoom, Google Meet, Teams. So that is something that I really want to make a note of, that teachers are engaging, with each other when it comes to learning from each other. So,
and I do know one of the things that we've talked about kind of over the whole pandemic once it started was such simple things like problem solving, right? Like our teachers, a lot of times, a lot of our support is working with them. They, my camera's not working, or it kicked me out of Google Meet, and so just taking the time to like really know your devices and feeling confident enough that I'm going to try all these different things. And when I say all these different things, I think one of the things that we always stress is, even if it's just one thing, right? You're embracing one thing that you're going to use all year. Then that right there is a step in the right direction, because I know teachers are overwhelmed, right?
How to connect your document camera, for example, that was a hot topic for a while, and then so somebody made a video and posted it, and it went around.
Anything else, Feli and Omar, that you would like to share with us today?
I think, and just kind of tying everything together, communication, collaboration, and sharing, and all of that. I think part of a very important digital skill that sometimes we don't see it as a digital skill would be just building a PLN and learning from others and connecting with other educators. We always say, if you have an answer to one of your problems, odds are there's another teacher that has the same question or struggling with the same thing, and just share out there. We are firm believers in sharing and not being afraid to ask questions or ask for help, because we might not have all the answers, but maybe a teacher down the road at a neighboring school district, or maybe upstate or something like that. When we connect as educators, I think that's, building that network and being able to just share and bounce ideas. I think that's a very important skill, especially now. It's always been important, but now, since there's not a lot of face-to-face interaction, I think just that virtual networking is something that is going to benefit us as educators, and then in turn we take that into our classrooms and for our students. So I think that's another skill that we should build on.
And another thing I think it's very important is for our teachers to know, and our students as well, to just click that button, press that button. Don't be afraid, right? If something happens, hey, we'll fix it. It's just as simple as Control-Z, right? Undo. So just having that, or making your teachers and your students feel that it's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are learning opportunities. We're going to learn. It's a lesson. It's part of life, right? So the situation that we're in right now, it's an unfortunate event, but at the same time, it's also a blessing, because we are learning more. We're collaborating more than we did before. Even if there's no the one-to-one collaboration, I've seen a lot of collaboration on social media. Oh my God, social media, totally amazing to collaborate. But I've seen like, okay, I have a question, let's create a Google Meet. So we can meet by like a 5-minute Google Meet, so you can tell me how to do that, Feli. Or I remember telling my teachers, hi, Google Meet was giving me a hard time today. Oh, I'm so glad you're telling me that. I thought it was me, Feli. What happened? I'm like, I don't know. It was Monday. Or, something. And then you make the teacher feel like, it's like with our students, that filter, right? Especially when you're learning a second language, that you come with that, I always forget it. Affective filter. It's not only for our students, it's also for us as humans, right? That we are a little bit afraid of saying, "Oy, I made a mistake," or "Oy, I don't know how to do that." But again, I go back to establishing those relationships where teachers feel comfortable and feel free, right? Questions and ask for help. So push the button. Control C.
I love it. Well, everybody, it's time to end this podcast. And here we go.
Until the next cup.
Until our next cup. Thank you, Feli and Omar.
Thanks,
You're
guys.
very welcome.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.